All right, so as he loves to do, President Trump has created a new controversy around this virus that has potentially vaguely racial tones. He called it the China virus. And Saagar, you have been taking some heat, and frankly, I have been taking some heat on your behalf.
Proxy heat. So first of all, let me say
embrace of this. So yeah, just explain your thinking around why you want to use that term.
Sure. First of all, let me say this. Everybody leave Krystal alone. She doesn't control my Twitter. I tweet, everything I tweet is on me. You can direct all hatred to this person right here.
But I'm legitimizing you. That's what's going on here. I'm giving legitimacy.
Even though we're co-hosts. Okay, anyway. That idiocy aside. I am passionate. The reason why I defend the term is because I think it is the height of cynical political correctness, and it's a proxy war over something that I am deeply passionate about, which is ensuring that American supply chains are repatriated from China to the United States. So the way that I see it is that by the proxy war over the outrage over calling it the China virus or the Chinese coronavirus and all of this stuff, et cetera, is really a way in order for people to say that whenever the time comes, as in right now, Senator Josh Hawley demanding all multinational corporations tell them how they're going to move supply chains out of China is itself racist. They're saying that it's racist for us to be concerned about supply chain interaction, about the fact that the Chinese government covered up this global pandemic for 2 months. And some of my critics have rightfully said, you don't seem to be, they said, oh, you don't seem as if you're so upset as well about the Trump administration's lack of response. No, I mean, people who watched Rising know that I was furious with the president's response, that I thought that for the first 3 weeks of this virus that they did not take it seriously. I was highly critical of the federal government, trying to sound the alarm, making sure that our viewers knew what was going on. So first of all, that's not even on the table. Second one, and you know what? This is totally legitimate, which is that people are saying you are legitimizing violence or attacks or bullying against Chinese Americans. So let me say this at the very top. I have nothing but contempt for anybody who would use this to cynically go after any Chinese American. And as I stood with Andrew Yang in battling back Asian American stereotypes during the campaign, I don't think anybody could reasonably say that that's what my agenda here is. So let me start off with that. And look, when I was in elementary school, people used to call me Saddam Hussein's nephew after 9/11. Like I've dealt with plenty of this stuff on my own. Yeah. However, I do not think people are so stupid that, and I think we should give enough people credit that nobody's going to hear the term Chinese coronavirus or Chinese virus and use that as an excuse in order to bully or attack people. This is a geopolitical point because the Chinese government has made very clear that they do not want to, they want to make sure they gaslight the entire world into believing that the virus did not emanate from China because it would absolve them of the pandemic cover-up in the first 2 months of this entire thing. So look, This is my full explanation. Yeah. I'm welcome to all criticism. And this is the other, I mean, all of this crypto-fascism, Nazism accusations is utterly ridiculous. Nobody has approached, I think, the left with more good faith than the right than me. And I would at least appreciate a little bit of that due on my side. But with that,
and this is the problem with like taking someone's Twitter feed and then extrapolating that's like the whole and complete sum of their view and their body of work, right? Because I think people who watch the show regularly know very much that you have been critical of the administration and that you are not into like, racist tropes and have been in fact very consistently, particularly with Asian Americans, an ally. Yes. I mean, look, here's my view. And part of why we haven't talked about it on the show to this point is because in my list of concerns about what's going on with coronavirus and the pandemic itself, the lack of response, the economic calamity, like what we call it is very, very low on my list of concerns about coronavirus. Now, look, my view is that this is not helpful. I would never call it the China virus because I do worry about the stigma that already is surrounding Asian Americans with this idea that they're infected and you have to stay away from them and it's somehow their fault, when obviously that's all absurd. And so that's why I have an issue with the term. But I also think this is one of those classic ploys from Trump. where he throws this out there, this bit of like cultural red meat, where the right is going to say, like, of course we call it the China virus because China was negligent and they covered this up, and their failure in response is part of why we have this pandemic. Absolutely true. And the left is going to say, this is racist, this is racialized, this is a problem. And then you get this culture war fight over it, which Donald Trump loves. He feels this is very strong ground for him to stand on. It is much more of what he would want to talk about versus the utter catastrophe and failure of the early stages of his response, which we can't get back, right? I'm glad that he's finally taking it seriously. Thank God that he is, but we can't get those weeks and months back. We're still living with the ramifications of not nearly enough tests, which means that the economic calamity is going to be that much worse because we all have to stay quarantined for longer. He doesn't want to have that discussion. He would love to have this fight, which is why I just haven't said anything about it, because I think, frankly, it's a waste of time. Look, to the extent I agree with you that, like, the idea that just calling the virus China virus is going to make people suddenly go, oh, now I hate Asian Americans. Like, I don't think that it quite works like that. But
it's ridiculous.
I don't think it's helpful either. So that is my view. I think it's kind of a sideshow debate that I wish people would not be engaged in. I don't think the president is helpful here. I don't think the term is helpful. But I also don't rank it as even in the top 100 of my concerns about coronavirus.
Yeah, and I appreciate all of that. And again, I want to say, like, I really, this reminds me of something, which is that what I said was, and this is apparently what got most pushback, is that it's about the priorities, which is that whenever I see the mainstream media, and frankly, a lot of the progressive left, for some reason on this particular instance, allied in trying to control, the whole, like, trying to legitimize speech is violence, and that people are somehow so stupid that they take an immediate cue from somebody saying Chinese virus and use that as an excuse to attack somebody. I think that's utterly ridiculous. I think that there are some racist people out there, they should be condemned, but that's not how any of this stuff actually works, having actually experienced much of this myself. And I think that what it really comes down to is, again, the Chinese regime covered this thing up. They are actively, their spokespeople are out there saying that the United States Army is the one who invented the virus and implanted it in Wuhan. I mean, these are deeply offensive things to Americans and insulting to the United States military. And that is something that really bothers me. And so if they're going to gaslight their population, which they're trying to in their search results, they're manipulating search results into trying to show their population that America is the one who is responsible for this, then this takes upon a geopolitical element to it. It is a legitimate term of use, and I think a lot of people are being tricked by the Chinese regime and by much of the mainstream media. And the mainstream media only cares about this for one thing, which is that they want to take down Trump, legitimize whatever the racism narrative, etc. But I think a lot of people are being falsely bought into the idea that just using that term is going to just greenlight millions of people to go and attack someone. I think that's just absolutely ridiculous. And they need to understand why somebody would be so concerned with what they see as a proxy war over trying to control America's supply chains. Look, this is all I really care about. Like, what I care about is bringing our supply chain back to the United States so American workers benefit. That's it. That's all I care about. And I think that's something that I think it's a linguistic proxy war over a much deeper and important policy debate. And you know what? If there's any lesson that's come out of this from my end, it's that people actually need to be educated on the Chinese regime and why anybody would be so concerned about it in the first place, because I think there's like a nonchalance and a cavalierness to which we view China, and we'll be like, oh, it's just like China. It's not like an enemy or something. And the way I look at it is just very, very different.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's what I would say is that I think the use of this term actually distracts from that debate and discussion that you want to have, because it sort of nukes the discussion.
And you might be right.
It makes it partisan, and it means that you're just arguing over this terminology rather than talking about how do we bring those supply chains back from China? How do we, where are the areas that have now been revealed in which we're totally insufficient? I was just looking at an article that was saying that now the holdup with testing is we don't have basic supplies like swabs to be able to do, not even the test kits, but just like the swabs that they need to be able to do the test. So To me, that's the place to focus the attention. But Saagar, I always appreciate you, and I'm willing to take whatever Twitter heat comes at me on your behalf.
No. This is a very direct message. You leave Krystal alone. Send it all my way. I can take every single one of it. All right.
All right.
We'll have more rising to do right after that.